Welcome back. It's part 2 of my coverage of the Guild Wars 2 version of the Underworld, an elite endgame area from the original game that finally, in the later months of 2017, was dropped in with the Path of Fire expansion and the start of Living World Season 4. If you missed the previous episode, there should be a link in the description for you guys to check it out. But let's jump on in as we progress a bit deeper in. I want to talk to you guys about some of the amazing stuff they did here. And in a lot of ways, the stuff I'm going to talk to you about now is some of my preferred stuff from the entire wing, even over the final boss. So, last episode, just to recap and find ourselves, we've covered our entry into the Underworld. We covered the fact that Grenth, as a part of the story, has left the Underworld and it's been abandoned, and we're kind of wondering where he is. And not only him, but his Reapers as well. The Reapers that assist Grenth are nowhere to be seen. We're all aware from the past of a fallen, imprisoned precursor god known as Doom, was somewhere in the Underworld, and now the question on our minds as we enter this place is, okay, if Grenth is gone, does this mean Doom is going to become a threat? As you entered the wing, we found a village that was under assault, the existence of a spirit that was trying to defend the village, and we had a fight to return that spirit to its body. Several of you pointed out as well this idea of these abominations flying off the platform and being destroyed. Yeah, the idea that's obvious. It's the spirit created that barrier, and the barrier is destroying the bodies. I can't believe I missed that, but there you go. That's basically the idea, and well pointed out to everyone. So the conclusion of the first encounter featured this spirit-like orb returning to the body on the platform, and the reveal that that character was, in fact, a woman called Desmina the whole time.
Nice gear. That feels good.
We did our part. Now who are you? What's happening down here?
You may call me Desmina.
Desmina?
Now be silent.
But
My body is too damaged to fight. I'll grant you what protection I can, but be ready. The consequence of mortals falling on the River of Souls is unclear. Death may not result in the expected.
Who's Desmina, you guys might be wondering? Desmina has been referenced as a part of the Guild Wars lore in the scriptures of Grenth ever since the very inception of this franchise. If you bought Guild Wars Prophecies right as it came out well over a decade ago, and you read the little lore book that they gave you with the disc, you would have read about the various gods and the scriptures of the gods, and Desmina was their reference right then. She's not a character we've ever met, but she is a character we've known about since the very beginning, and so it's kind of a cool moment to finally be able to see her all these years later. She's referenced more than just the books with the original game, though. In 2012, when Guild Wars 2 launched, there was an area in the Cursed Shore where we saw a giant temple to Grenth, remember? Well, the areas around there, the point of interest and stuff, all referenced Grenth-related stuff, and Desmina was referenced there as well. There's a whole section of the Cursed Shore called Desmina's Hallows. Yeah, that's in reference to her, Grenth's first follower. If you saw part 1 of this little series I'm doing here, you will remember I've already read out that little bit of lore. There's also, by the way, a reference to another character, the Mausolus Sea. The Mausolus Sea refers to another Grenth-associated follower, and that was the character who brought the teachings of the God of Death to Elona. Elona being where the current expansion is. So far there's been no reference to Mausolus beyond that area in the Cursed Shore, and I guess you would have expected maybe they could have done that here in the Underworld, considering that this is all Path of Fire related, and you need Path of Fire to be able to get in and access this content, but hey. Maybe it was in one of the Istani books, I can't quite recall. Anyway, so at this point, also, we can look back at current events. Remember, just before the Underworld was released, we had these small updates, and there were references to a lady in red, remember? And we speculated a few things. We thought about Kerida or Livia. We thought about the nameless lich that was at Droknar's Forge in Guild Wars 1. But it seems the lady in red, as Desmina's wearing red, was Desmina that they were referring to. There was also this vague reference to a DS, remember? DS? And I guess they didn't properly answer this. Was DS Desmina? I mean, I'm not quite sure how that works, except that Desmina has a D and an S in her name. Maybe DS is still an unanswered mystery and it's unresolved, or I'm missing something. You guys can point that out below. But yeah, there was the DS and the Lady in Red thing, and now we have a little bit of context for that. So, with the defeat of the Soulless Horror and Desmina's return, we can now return to Glenna, who has some extra things to say, and really that's most of Glenna's involvement with the Wing. Here's the conversation.
She said her name was Desmina.
Desmina, huh? Why does that name sound familiar? Desmina. Desmina! As in the first follower of Grenth, Desmina?
I don't know. Sure. Maybe.
The keeper of the gate. The herald of the Prince of Winter. The necromancer. Yes, it must be. Ambitious and cunning, human scriptures say. Granted the powers of death by Grenth himself. Supposedly.
Can I trust her?
Oh, no idea.
What about those spirits?
They're not very social. They do seem to believe she's protecting them. Makes sense if she's really Grenth's disciple.
She says she'll protect us.
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna point out that the ghosts here are doing everything in their power to avoid going up that river. Not to mention that she seems to be having trouble keeping herself intact. But it's not like you have much choice, so good luck.
So, this establishes extremely quickly the second encounter of the Wing, and it's to do with the River of Souls. So, this was one of the coolest things for me to see, even before killing the first boss. You can actually see the River of Souls is back there. This got me extremely hyped extremely quickly. And to explain why, we have to go back in time a little bit. We have to talk about Nightfall. So, the River of Souls is something we've seen before in Guild Wars. It featured in the Nightfall story. In one of the final chapters of that campaign, we, the heroes, descend into the mists to take the fight to Abaddon within his own prison, the Realm of Torment. So we're not in the underworld there, but we are in the mists. We're at the Realm of Torment, and while there, we have a mission called the Gate of Pain. The Gate of Pain has the River of Souls in it. We find it flowing through this tormented, horrible, corrupt realm, and there's all these spirits just sort of charging down in a certain single direction. And what we find out as a part of the Gate of Pain mission is that Abaddon, who was the big bad guy at that time, Abaddon had set up a dam over the river called the Soul Wire, and he was capturing souls from it to harvest. And by harvest, I guess he was consuming those souls. He was presumably using them to grow his armies, his strength, weaken his bonds that kept him in the Realm of Torment or whatever. Okay, so we, the heroes, naturally decide we can't have this, and we want to destroy the Soul Wire to let the River of Souls flow through again, and everybody can be happy. Interestingly as well, there was a Marganite city nearby, and if you read the Guild Wars 2.dat, it says that it was dominated by demons who had erected the Soul Wire, the dam, and those demons now feast on the souls of the damned, which is pretty cool. We hear in this wing, here in 2017, about Doom eating souls, too. Desmina will say that to us very shortly. So is that a coincidence that these various evil people from the franchise have been consuming souls from this river? I don't know. It's up to you guys to decide on that one. So, again, back in Guild Wars 1, we had a mission to destroy the Soul Wire, and a particular point of the plot at that point was that the spirit of one of our traveling companions' son was also here, and it was a big revelation and an emotional moment. As well as the dam, by the way, there were driders, torture webs, that were plucking souls from the river as it flowed on. And the suggestion in the original game was that these driders were taking the souls, and them doing that was integral to keeping the dam powered. Alright, so with all of this cool information under our belt, you might be wondering, well, what's this got to do with the underworld and so forth? Because it's important to note that while the Soul River did appear in Nightfall, we weren't in the underworld, and it never appeared anywhere else. And yet, here in Guild Wars 2, we see the River of Souls in the Hall of Chains in the underworld. Why is that? Well, it's interesting to note that the torture-wed driders I talked about are underworld creatures. It's interesting to note that the Gate of Pain mission is where we learn about an emissary of Doom, and Doom obviously being underworld related. It's important to note that the damning procedure was orchestrated by Doom from the underworld, and that the spirits being reaped were promised to Abaddon by Doom. So, even though this was a Realm of Torment Nightfall thing, it's all underworld forces that were actually understanding how to work the river, and it was underworld forces with expertise relating to it, not Abaddon's forces. So, it's also interesting to note that the lore in this franchise on death is that new souls first go to Grenth in the underworld to be judged by him, and then they're sent to the other afterlives. And it's interesting to note that there is a canon-confirmed connection between the underworld and the Realm of Torment in at least one place, and that's the underworld bone pits, which we can't visit in this raid wing just yet, but maybe later. And lastly, it's interesting to note that this idea of a River of Souls is extremely similar, obviously, to the real-life Greek mythological idea of the River Styx, which, of course, is where fresh spirits flow to the underworld. So, basically, in Guild Wars 1, there were a ton of suggestions that the River of Souls we saw in the Realm of Torment was flowing to the underworld. And there were a lot of suggestions that it was more related to the underworld than anything else, even though the only place we actually saw it was the Realm of Torment. I'll note that if you went into the Guild Wars 1 DAT as well, you could get a bit more information that says that the river was once a flow that took the drained souls down into storage in the Abyss, and it was since damned by the natives of the Marganite city, Bakessa, who now feed on the still conscious souls. So, the idea of it's going into storage in the Abyss, does that mean it passes through the underworld? Does that discredit the underworld idea? I don't know. Obviously, .dat information is a questionable canonicity, and some of it's been confirmed in POF recently, but a lot of it also hasn't. So you can do what you like with that last bit of information, but it really seemed like the underworld had a lot to do with the River of Souls. And finally, what does this mean? We come into Wing 5, we enter the underworld, and what do we see right away? The River of Souls. Or at least a River of Souls. And because I suppose it could be a separate one, but I like to see this. There's all these floating different pieces of information that were bobbing around in my head and had been kind of unresolved, and then straight away here with the Guild Wars 2 Underworld we see it. So I had a reason to geek out as a bit of a nerd, and hopefully you guys do a little bit there as well now that you're in the know. So it's interesting as well to think that here in Wing 5, because they did another Spirit River, we could have had another Soul Weir here, and we could have had, you know, more torture webs and things. We could have had a torture web boss. They didn't do that. And in fact, of all of the encounters and all the bosses here, the devs are actually reusing assets from the rest of the game everywhere except the final boss. They seem to have been really cautious about wasting lots of time building new assets and things in Wing 5. Like, if you look back at some of the earlier Wings Guild Wars 2's added, they've really gone all out and added lots of unique stuff. On this one, it's just the final boss, and they really went heavy on the final boss. The other stuff's reusing old things. Like Encounter 1, we talked about in the previous video. That was just a human, female, undead thing fighting us with a hammer looking thing, right? I think it was a hammer. Anyway, you get the picture. So, let's talk a little bit about Encounter 2, which starts straight away, really. And the idea is we need to escort Desmina up the river. And yes, that means it's an escort, full-fledged event, though. She does give us a little bit of dialogue and story as this goes through. A bit of exposition. She says this, that Grenth fled and we failed to keep the Ender in his chains. The spirits of the newly dead now flow up the River of Souls directly to the Hall of Judgment, to Doom. And he feeds. He sealed himself in the hall while he gathers his strength and works to reclaim the underworld. Soon, Doom's power will be great enough for him to invade the mortal realm. So there you go. That's it, really. A very de-emphasized explanation as to what's really going on here. I suppose we were all expecting it. Yes, this is all about fighting Doom. Doom is the final boss of this wing. That's what it all revolves around. Yes, Grenth left, and Doom now has the freedom to do what he likes, and he's just bringing all these souls to himself to feed on them and grow in strength, similar to how Abaddon was once upon a time as well. So, it's our job to try and stop that, and Desmina will be our ally in that attempt. So, let's talk a bit about Encounter 2 mechanically. It begins something that a lot of the next few encounters will do. It starts establishing mechanics and themes that will coalesce and be relevant in the final boss fight. So one of the mechanics, and I don't have footage for it, unfortunately, for you guys, is a death mechanic, which means if you die in this fight, instead of being immediately defeated, you actually have a chance as a spirit that has been disconnected from their body to run around and collect a bunch of orbs in the area, and if you grab enough, you'll come back to life. Okay, and this idea of spirits being split from their bodies is really major in this wing. You'll remember Encounter 1 was actually about that. What state did we find Desmina in originally? She was split from her bodies. And that now happens to us as players as well. So in this fight, if you go down, you're introduced to the idea that you can come back to life by reclaiming these orbs. And that will come back very soon as well. So, let's talk a bit about going up the river. Again, this isn't so much a guide, a full-fledged guide with every nuance, as just a presentation of the mechanics. Objective, get Desmina to walk all the way up to the Hall of Judgment at the end. Alright, so since my hard drive is completely bloated and I can't be bothered to look through it, this is a random run I did today. Almost a full pug run of the River of Souls. And let's jump on through it. So this is actually pretty recent footage. There's unfortunately a weird graphical bug that's hit me here where one of the main mechanics is looking very strange. But hey, that would just be some of the fun stuff here. So, right, we're going to get Desmina up. The encounter starts by just pressing F and speaking to her. She says, I am ready. And we move on. We say, let's go. So they really do an interesting thing here. One of the major threats is falling off of the river. That will get you screwed over. And one of the main ways that the devs try to knock you off is with this recurring mechanic here straight away. These spatial rifts. If you can see that big green looking crack, that rift off on the right. These slowly suck you towards them. So if you remember with some of the new fractals that they've added, and especially obviously with mounts, the devs have added lots of new sort of movement things to the game. And so what this does is it just gradually, slowly sucks you towards it. This is going to be a mechanic in the final encounter as well. To stop the rift from constantly pulling people towards it, you have to attack it. So they have stacks on them. I think they start with 10 stacks, and every time they get attacked, a stack goes away. Once they run out of all of their stacks, the rift won't pull you anymore. So a good thing to do is set, say, a ranger pet or something on it, summon illusions and things that will just keep attacking them, and they won't pull you anymore. So the idea is, as you're trying to deal with everything else, you're going to be getting pulled in various directions unless people damage the rifts and keep them down. They do continuously regenerate stacks, so you've got to be careful of that. So here's one of the main things that we're going to have to fight against. There's an enemy that spawned against us. This is the Hallowed Bomber. So bombers will walk towards Desmina and just seek to blow her up. Remember, we are trying to keep her alive, and they'll do massive damage to everyone else. Fortunately, they're kind of squishy. And at the same time, so here we go, you can see he started his animation. We've got this orange circle. I don't know whether I'll target him and show you, but he has a break bar. So bombers are pretty easy to deal with as long as you have some CC. You break the break bar, you can interrupt them, and you got to kill them. Breaking the break bar doesn't make them go away or anything. They'll just try to do the ability again, but then you can break it again. You just generally want to kill them quickly, and as you can see here, a rift has already spawned. Immediately, we're dealing with the very first bomber and a rift at the same time. So we're all being sucked to the left as we're trying to kill this guy. Desmina continues walking forwards. By the way, there was an early strat a long time ago where you could just stealth her the entire way through. This is how the earliest groups were doing this. You could cheese the whole encounter. That's not possible anymore. So here we've got another mob out in front. This is an Innovator. So Innovators are a little bit different in that they don't have break bars. You've just got to kill them. And what they do is they'll bring Desmina's shield down. So one mechanic I haven't talked about is if you walk out onto the road here on your own and just try to rush on ahead, you're constantly going to take damage. You can block that damage and mitigate it, but you will keep taking damage. Desmina has this big red circle that's keeping us safe. If the Innovator explodes, the shield goes down and everybody starts getting hit. So you got bombers, you got Innovators, you've got rifts, and here we can again see that another rift has spawned. So we've got to take out. You can see I'm getting sucked towards it. And you might be wondering what these giant black things are that are appearing on the screen. Yeah, that's the visual bug. So I'll tell you the other mechanic now as well. If you look very closely here, and again, I mentioned in the previous video, there's some serious visual noise issues, I believe, with this wing. If you look very carefully, there's a small orange circle there in Desmina's bubble. What that is doing is it's representing lightning, okay? So I'll try and catch you a better appearance of it. Lightning is constantly striking the group. And I'll try to show. So here we go. Here's some lightnings about to spawn. What the lightning is it attaches to a specific player. So if it attaches to me, as I move around with W, A, S, and D, the orange ring will move with me. And after a short delay, it will detach from us so we can walk away from it. And then it will summon a giant lightning strike down that does big damage. So here you can see it's here. This is the lightning strike. It does big damage and stuns. This is what these big black things are. The visual bug is the lightning for some reason is appearing as a giant black blob. So you'll see whenever there's a black blob in this footage, you'll know that that's lightning. And that's randomly assigning to various party members. So if you get the lightning, the idea is to walk very briefly out of the bubble or behind the bubble so that the lightning safely drops over there and you'll be fine. You can also, for what it's worth, drop lightning on elevators and blow them up with the lightning, maybe even bombers too for CC and things. So that is something you can do too. But why this is so dangerous, hopefully I can show you in a second, but it's how the lightning stuns combo with the rifts, which I'll show you all in a second. So we now get 2 bombers at once and a rift. The rift we've already broken down though. So we want to get CCs and kills on all of these bombers here so that they can't do anything to Desmina and do lots of damage to us. So here you can see here's a break bar from a bomber and we're going to launch that down as fast as we possibly can. So that's fine, and Desmina continues walking. Now we're pushing out ahead to this elevator. You want to kill the elevators early so that they obviously can't take the shield down and put all of that added pressure. Here you can see lightning again was at the back of the group there. And you saw Desmina's shield went down for a second because that elevator actually got his animation off. And we're continuing to walk forwards. Now, here comes another interesting mechanic that we're going to skip with our strategy. You'll notice that there's a portal has just been placed. If you watch very closely, one of the pugs I'm with, this Mesmer, is running out on his own out there. Now, it's dangerous to be out there, but they can block if they're chronos and so on. Now, he's going to do his portal really late. Usually, you'd see this has happened. But Desmina isn't going to be pressured right now, and we're going to portal ahead of her. What this is allowing us to do is dodge some spirit walls. So, do you remember the first encounter? If you watched the first video, there were those walls charging across the platform. There are more of those here. So you can have rifts, walls, lightning, bombers, elevators, all coming at you at once. The walls won't hurt Desmina, but they can instantly downstate us. So we're using a portal here to bypass the walls, since Desmina's going to be safe from them. So here we're just porting further up the road. Everybody's getting damaged here. I'm on a healer, by the way. And I'm on an Elementalist Arcane healer, which is great. Geyser's really strong because if people go downstate and a rift is up, you're going to try and res them, but you'll slide away from the body. The Geyser will at least stay there. The Geysers don't get pulled in and you can res people. So very, very, very strong. Firebrand's really strong here as well because of all the blocks and the Aegis and the stability and so forth. And obviously massive heals too. So Firebrand's really, really solid. So yeah, we do that. And now we're moving back on in, back towards Desmina. And basically, that's just a nice little strategy there that lets you avoid the first wave of walls. Makes it kind of difficult to explain this for noobs here, but there you go. So more of these black things you'll see. So here you go. Here's a wall, and in fact, I get hit by one here. As an Ellie, I can vapor form out. But see, this is the visual noise issue. You got to watch really closely for them. I believe I was deep in a conversation and got caught by that one while I was unawares, but there you go. So yeah, more walls moving left and right. Now, if you can imagine, if you get stunned by lightning, you can then get pulled by a rift into a wall. So it's kind of fun the way that the devs layer everything up here. You've also got these spirit hordes, just random mobs that are charging at Desmina. They do actually really hurt. So there you go. I had lightning there and I dropped it. Kind of in a bad place, actually. Here's another renovator. We're pushing forwards. Desmina does have a health bar. This isn't over. It's not just a fight for us to survive. It's a fight to keep Desmina alive. And so as a healer, in a moment towards the end of this, you're going to see I charge back to her because she's very low and I just desperately need to keep her up. Which is kind of tricky because obviously Guild Wars was designed as a 5-man experience, not 10 really. So most of my skills heal for 5 unless I'm right next to Desmina. I believe that's the thing about closest, right? So here we got more walls. There I did see that wall, but I got clipped by it. And a good example there, I get to vapor form forward. Now remember, there is a mechanic where if you die on this, you do get a second chance at life. Some orbs will spawn on the road, and you can just grab the orbs, and if you do it quick enough, you'll come back alive. As your spirit is separated from your body, but we're in the underworld, so we're okay. So there, if you see all these green ticks I'm getting here, this is an example of why Geyser's so good. I can just press F on a body, start getting massive reses on players, and just move on. So here Desmina's really low, as you can see, and I need to keep her alive. So I move in, I use my self-heal. We just stack lots and lots and lots of heals now. We use an overload. And generally the pug run goes very well there. So that's Encounter 2. All the walls are pretty much clear here. The devs are really forgiving at the end of Encounter 2. There's not much happening after that bit you just saw. Now we're just sort of killing time. There's rifts, but there's no enemies. There's lightning, but nothing too dangerous. We have one player dead back there. Again, this build's really strong. This Ellie build's really strong because if I had my Geyser cooldown there, I could have cast that at 1200 range away from him and picked him up. There you see I drop a lightning behind us. God, the black boxes do look really quite bad, don't they? And we're at the top, and we get to the next area of the wing, and that is the Hall of Judgment.
It's safe here. I'll wait for you. You have work to do.
What work?
If we can take back the 3 Grenth statues from Doom, we can break the seal on the hall.
And what will you be doing while we handle the statues?
I need to recover if I'm going to fight Doom. If our allies arrive, I'll be here to greet them. Now go.
Now, I was really planning on showing you guys the next encounter in this video too, because I didn't want to make a million videos on this raid. But since we're already so long, since we spent so long talking about the lore of the Soul River, I guess we'll do it next video. So there you go, guys. That is reaching the Hall of Judgment, and the wing's about to get really, really interesting. So do bear with me. I will see you next time for more progression and interesting details about what happened here in the absence of Grenth. Thanks, guys. I'll see you shortly.